Good evening and karibu sana to This Is The Day. My name is Sarah Otieno, and today in studio we are talking about an issue that is affecting a lot of people, and that is gender-based violence. Now, there is a recent report that was released clearly stating that 32% of women face gender-based violence. And not only women, even men face gender-based violence, and 18% of them are exposed. And today in studio we have Josephine Mwatibo, who will help us take through this and understand more about gender-based violence. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm feeling great.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
When we talk about gender-based violence, what does it really mean? Or rather, how do we define that this is gender-based violence and this is not?
Gender-based violence, in a simple definition, I would define it as an act that is perpetrated against an individual against their will, but it's based on gender norms and unequal power relationships. What I mean by that is there's an issue with the definition of gender, because when you hear gender, everyone quickly thinks of women.
Yeah.
But when we talk of gender, we're talking about what defines masculinity and femininity, the roles that girls are given and boys are given.
Yeah.
So that defines who you're going to be in society, and you're supposed to live according to the feminine behavior or the masculine behavior. So that is violence that is based on those kinds of norms.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that report that clearly points out that 32% of women face GBV.
Yes.
But it's also pointing out that men face violence. So this is something that a lot of people assume that it's only women, as you have pointed out in the definition. Please just help us understand how men are affected by gender-based violence.
Back to the definition.
Yeah.
That, first of all, men are also human beings. But it's just because of that simple definition of gender that has been misquoted and misconstrued for quite a while to mean women, it also means men. And right now is when we're seeing in our society that men are actually coming up and they're speaking out and they're talking about the kinds of violence that they face. So it is something that actually men are actually going through.
Yeah.
And we are glad that we even have a statistic of 18%, meaning that there's progress. So it's soon just going to come out if just they continue reporting and talking about their experiences. Yes.
Okay. And the examples of gender-based, but before we go to that, maybe we should tell our listeners to text in their questions and maybe their comments. We're live on Family Radio and also live on Family TV, and you can text us on 0786 316 316. That is the WhatsApp number, and the SMS line is 20316, and then we'll get to understand more about gender-based violence. But for now, Josephine,
Yes.
we have examples of these violence cases.
Yes.
And most of the time, sorry to say this, but it's a perception that violence and sexual violence and maneno ya FGM, we have cases that are affecting only women. But there are other kinds and examples of gender-based violence that people don't bring out in the open.
Yes. I can say that there are four types. There are four broad types of gender-based violence. We have physical violence, which is the one that we know of. The one where there's kicking, there's slapping, there's maiming, there's, someone comes with a panga, cuts off your hand, those are the types. That is the most common type that we know. Then we do have emotional or psychological violence.
Yeah.
Emotional psychological violence is the one whereby someone does things to you that gets you in a very difficult place emotionally. For example, you're living in a house with someone comes home, they're not talking to you, mtu amekasirika, like someone is just always angry and you just don't know why, and you're just living in fear of, what did I do wrong, what did I not do? So that is one type that is leading so many people right now into depression. And then we do have economic violence. Economic violence is the one where, for example, you're told do not go to work or leave your job, I want you to stay at home, take care of the children, so that kind of violence that makes you not be able to build yourself economically or even build your family or even the society at large. And then now we have the sexual violence. Sexual violence, we're talking about rape, we're talking about defilement, we're talking about sodomy, we're talking about those types of violence of a sexual nature. So we can put them in those four broad terms.
Okay. I like the point where you said that there is emotional violence.
Yes.
And this is something that affects mostly the men. And
Absolutely.
please allow me to bring up this thing that is so much and people are talking about right now, toxic masculinity.
Yes.
So men are suffering emotionally inside,
Yes.
resulting to gender-based violence, but they're not saying it
Yes.
because they fear, oh, how will the next person perceive me as a man? I'm supposed to be strong.
Yes.
Can we say that emotional violence affects mostly the men?
Yes, I think we can actually, okay, emotional violence, I can't say it mostly affects the men because even if someone slaps you, punches you, kicks you, if you're raped, if someone tells you not to go to work, you'll still be emotionally affected.
Yeah.
All types of violence have the element of emotional violence. But we can put it in the sense that, yes, men do suffer emotional violence more. And when we're talking about toxic masculinity, we are talking about, we go back to the definition of what GBV is, because it is it's violence that's formed on whether your masculinity or femininity. So we're talking about young boys being grown up in an environment where you're told, boys don't cry. I mean, boy, you have to man up. I mean, don't go around telling people what you're feeling in your heart.
Yeah.
And, I mean, be a man.
Be a man.
In fact, that statement, be a man. So they grew up in this space where they're like, okay, so if I maybe want to express myself and I just want to say, I didn't like how you people treated me or you did ABCD, it goes back to that place for, excuse me, you need to man up and you don't show your vulnerability. That's not what men do.
Yeah.
And even from where they've grown up, probably that is what they've seen with their fathers, with their grandfathers. People don't go around men, especially, talking about their feelings. And that is why we are having what is happening in the country. Most men are committing suicide because they are not able to express themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that point. What really causes gender-based violence?
That's a really broad question.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about what causes gender-based violence, like we've said, we're talking about unequal power relationships. We live in a patriarchal society. It is male-dominated, and the man's voice has more power than a woman's voice. We've seen even from ever since you grow up in a home when you're young, like we've seen this, even we've read about it, like the girls, if there's no school fees, then the girls will be told, we have to marry you off because we have to get the cows, we sell them, we have to take your brother to school. So there are things that start from gender norms. What
Yeah.
the society has accepted to happen, that one person has more value over the other person, and you see it becomes a build-up, so that even when girls grow, when they go through adolescence, when they go through the reproductive age, they start stepping back and they live in a cocoon. They're like, no, girls don't do such
this.
things. So it's just something that starts because the society has normalized this violence, and we've just come to see it as it's normal.
Yeah.
Yes, girls don't do such things and boys do certain things. So it's that normalization of the gender norms. Yes.
And can you also say that some cultural beliefs have led to this gender-based violence, and not only in women, also in men? Can we say that?
Yes, we can absolutely say that, especially the cultural beliefs. We've seen right now how the campaign against female genital mutilation has intensified. We have female genital mutilation happening, and this is cutting and interfering with the girls' parts because they're trying to hinder their sexual activity.
Yeah.
That's usually most of the thinking behind FGM. And for most communities and cultural beliefs, FGM is a prerequisite for marriage. You cannot get marriage if you have not gone through this
The process of FGM.
that leads you. This is supposed to transition you from a girl to becoming a woman. So it's something that you have to go through, and it's usually for the sexual pleasure of the man.
Yeah.
Because you are supposed to, you know, keep yourself until the time you get married. And even the time they get married, there's usually the white sheet that's put on the floor, so that when your husband, then that act happens, if the blood doesn't pour, then that's a different story. And if it does, then it's a celebration. So you're seeing the cultural beliefs that tend to make all these things happen. The FGM, the child marriage.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, there's already a question who is there's a person who's asking. His name is Mutanu. Mutanu is saying, I love the conversation. Please talk and insist more on emotional violence, especially among the married couple. It's something that is happening.
Absolutely.
Men and women, wives and husbands are having emotional violence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And what I'd like to say about emotional violence, like I've said, all types of violence have an emotional tag to it. And I can say that even from my experience and even from the work that I have done and with the communities and the survivors and the victims that I have interacted with, like when it comes to emotional violence, I think sometimes it's even the base before you get to that point of the physical violence, the sexual violence. I think it starts with the emotional violence,
yeah.
you know, because like I said, someone comes home, they're not talking, or, you know, someone just completely shuts you out of their life, and this is supposed to be your husband. You need to sit, you need to make decisions together, but it's just not something they're doing, you know. Or the wife just comes and, you know, she cooks and, you know, she leaves the food there. She goes, she doesn't eat, or you cook for your husband, he comes, he doesn't eat. So you see, these things create a build-up. They start over a while creating resentment. And, you know, you start building up the anger. And this is where we are finding out cases where a woman is being stabbed 15 times, 20 times. You know, by the time you're stabbing someone 1, 2, 3, that is a lot of build-up. And that is an emotional, you know, process. It's emotional torture. And that is how the emotional violence then comes out, through the physical, through the sexual. Yes. So
That's really
that is what I would say.
And talking of that, someone else is saying, hi Sarah, thank you for the discussion today. It's really an informative one, but please also note and insist that men are going through torture. And she's also asking another question, and this is a bit intense and personal, so I'll try to paraphrase. The husband could not pay dowry because the relatives refused the amount of money that was being given. And to her, she's defining this as violence.
Yes.
When it comes to your dowry, are we supposed to clarify that as violence too? Gender-based violence?
Yes. I think we can actually put that as one of the as a form of gender-based violence, because when we're talking about harmful traditional practices, we are talking about payment of dowry. Payment of dowry is actually a good thing. It is a good practice. But you see, I don't know, with the kind of society that we're living and how things are changing, it has now formed and it has become a kind of business. I mean, I can speak from, you know, experiences that I've seen with my family, with my friends, that, you know, this dowry conversations become really intense. And, you know, by the time you're leaving the ceremony, the husband, I mean, the couple are not talking to each other. That family just gets into their cars and goes and goes. This leaves a lot of strain on the young couple who want to get married. Yes? And it also leaves a strain between them because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is my family. I can't go against them, and even him, he can't go against them. So you see, it leaves a lot of strain. And this is a form of violence because emotionally it's hurting you, and sometimes it even becomes physical because someone might come and release the emotional stress in you and probably slap you or punch you and kick you and just be like, why is your family so difficult?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't say that is a form of gender-based violence and one that is actually really affecting the society right about now.
Well, you've talked about that, and I remembered something. The issue of inheritance. And we're talking about wife inheritance.
Yes.
Yeah? And it happens in some communities in Kenya.
Yes.
Of course, it's something that as we develop is fading away, but we must agree that it's still happening. Wife inheritance is
Absolutely.
happening.
Yes.
Can we say that this is a form of violence? Because most of the time, this is not a willing process. It's not a give and give process.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can we clarify that as violence?
When we
and
talk-
especially for the women.
Yes. As we defined gender-based violence, it's something that is perpetrated against. It's something that is perpetrated against a person's will. So it's not something that you've actually given in and be like, okay, maybe I want to be a part of this process.
Yeah.
So when it comes to wife inheritance, I understand that it was done, and it's usually done so that you can be able to keep the family and the genes and, you know, the wealth and everything just among the family. So it's something that is actually happening, and this is a form of violence because this is a woman who has just lost the husband, and, you know, she's still grieving. She's wondering, you know, what is going to be her next step. How will she take care of her children? And before you know it, you have a brother or someone in the family who's just there, you know, they're waiting. They're like, okay, I want to just jump on this wagon. And the woman is not given an opportunity to make a choice and decide if this is something she wants to do. So this is violence. It's violence against the woman because she has not made this choice.
And she's not given consent.
She's not given consent. So you see, it puts her in a very awkward place, and that is violence. So we cannot sugarcoat it. We cannot give it any other term.
Okay.
Yes.
Daniel from Kisumu, thank you for the discussion. I also have Masi Muriuki who is saying that discussion is real time. I am from Pokot East, and the girl child in that place really goes through torture. Family, early marriages, forced marriages, etc. It is really heartbreaking. Talking of the Pokot community, these marginalized communities, the girl child is really suffering.
Absolutely.
And that brings me to the next point about FGM. There's a campaign right now in our country that we are trying to phase out FGM. And there's the 16 days that was set aside to make sure that we eliminate gender-based violence.
Yes.
But FGM, it's like a kidonda, you know. It's not ending and it's not fading away
Yes.
very easily. What really is the problem?
When it comes to female genital mutilation, I can say, like you said, it's really, really sad.
Yeah.
Because right now, as we speak, we have 100 million, over 100 million women and girls living with the effects of female genital mutilation.
Wait, you said over 100
Yes.
million?
Yes, girls living with the effects of female genital mutilation.
That's a big number.
And that is a big number according to the UN statistics. And, you know, when you have something like this that's happening and affecting so many girls,
Yeah.
and, you know, people are still hiding behind, and, you know, it becomes a problem. And I really applaud our president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, on the stand that he took, that we are going to end, his government purposes to end FGM
Yeah.
by 2020. And even the fact that he got the Council of Elders and the elders in the community, the men, to go to State House and be able to sit there, first of all, listen. Because first of all, let's have this conversation that men usually don't know what goes on in FGM. They don't know the process. They don't know any of these things because it is the women who do it.
A woman putting that pressure on a fellow woman.
Yes. It is women,
Yeah.
and they're actually really old women because I have seen them, I have met them, I have interacted with the women who perform this practice. And, you know, some of them are really old, and you're wondering, you're like, how can you even see what you're cutting? You know, I mean, and it's really sad. And they're like, this is something that happened to us, and we had good marriages, so we want the same for you. And, you know, what happens is that during childbirth, it becomes very difficult if you've gone through female genital mutilation.
Yeah.
And many women are losing their lives at that point, but the communities don't see it that way. They're saying that when you die, you did something wrong. It's a curse because you're not supposed to die. But they're not seeing it as an effect of the female genital mutilation. You know, so right now I like the fact that it's a conversation that has been intensified. The campaigns have been intensified, and we are talking about it. The men have gotten to see videos, they've gotten to listen to testimonies, they've gotten to hear the story of survivors, and now they're starting to see it from a different way. So, I mean, I'm happy that our president took the stand, and now we are able to move forward knowing that we are all working together. And we thank even for the FGM Act, the Prohibition of FGM Act, the law that was put in place that clearly outlines if you're caught doing this practice, there are charges. Even if it was happening in your neighbor's house and you sat there and you knew, you're also going to be arrested. So I'm grateful
Well, that's a
for
good
that
one.
campaign.
Yeah, we'll be talking about more on the effects of gender-based violence to both men and women. So stay tuned, but up about. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to This Is the Day. We're live on Family TV and also live on Family Radio. And today we're talking about gender-based violence. And in studio we have the perfect person to take us through that and how we can avoid gender-based violence. We have Josephine Mobito in studio. Mwatibo. Well, thank you for that correction. Now, we talked about the causes, how people are being affected by gender-based violence.
Yes.
But we need to tackle a bit on the effects, what it causes to a person.
Yes. So when we're talking about the effects of gender-based violence, first of all, we can start on the physical. You can have injuries because, like we said, the slapping, the kicking, the maiming leaves you with an injury, which can give you disability,
Yeah.
long-term or short-term. You know, when someone cuts off their hand with a panga, then, you know, they've actually gone away with a part of your body and therefore leaves you with a disability. Then we do have also exposure to infections and sexually transmitted diseases. These are also some of the sexual and reproductive health effects of gender-based violence. We also have chronic diseases because someone might end up having hypertension, someone is having blood pressure because of what happened to them. Then also we are talking about death. I mean, you can just die
Yeah.
immediately any form of gender-based violence happens to you. And then we're also talking about psychological effects. Someone might get into depression because maybe if you were raped or you went through defilement when you were young, it's not something that you would want to talk about to anyone. So this can also lead you to getting into substance abuse because you need something to help you forget the things that, you know, you're going through.
Yeah.
Then it also has an economic and social impact. Economic in the sense that right now when we're talking about economic stability, when a woman's productivity has been taken away because, you know, like we're saying, her hand has been cut off or she's been told, don't go to work, you sit and take care of the children, well, it's also having an impact on the society and on the economy of the country. When we talk about social development in terms of national building, women lose their participation in the process because they do not participate in decision making at any level because you cannot be able to attend these meetings. You've been told stay home and, you know, you're suffering from physical violence. So these are some of the effects which lead to a lot of burden on our health system and our judicial systems because we have so many cases that are still in court and, you know, they're still trying to figure them out. So yeah, it has really dire effects and consequences.
We have rising cases of suicidal cases in our country.
Yes.
Rising numbers. Can we also attribute gender-based violence to the rising numbers?
Yes, we can. Like we said, like when it comes to suicide, it's an emotional violence. It's something that has a tag on each type of gender-based violence. It doesn't matter if someone slapped you or you are raped or you are defiled. It leaves an emotional, you know, an effect on you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what someone did. Each type of violence has an effect and it always becomes emotional. It doesn't matter after how long. Yes.
I have Sarah from Naivasha who's telling me that I would point a finger to the judicial system because we have so many cases reported but nothing is done. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't actually point a finger at the judiciary. I feel like they are, they've taken so many steps and they're steps in the positive direction. And we're seeing actually, in fact, thank God for social media. Nowadays, you just need to raise an alarm about something that is happening somewhere and DCI are going to take it through. And before we know it, you know, the case is in court and it's followed up and people are getting charged and people are getting arrested.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're not where we used to be. I feel like the judiciary has taken great steps in the right direction to ensure that there's access to justice for all victims of gender-based violence. Yes.
And you have John from Nakuru saying that he loves the conversation. Thank you, John, for tuning in. I also would love to know, where should someone go in case they face gender-based violence? Where should I go? I'm just a kid. I'm putting myself in that position. I am just a kid who is exposed to a community that practices FGM.
Yes.
Where am I supposed to go?
Okay, how I would answer that is, right now we have a lot of safe houses and rescue centers coming up. Most of them, we find them in the communities where, for example, FGM and child marriage is happening. And we're having like development partners who are coming together with the local communities, with the government, national and county governments, to be able to come up together, to come up with these rescue centers and to come up with these safe spaces where children or women and girls or anyone who experiences violence can go and get treatment. They can go and get a safe place to be until they're able to figure things out. Also in the same place, there's a police station, for example. The police stations have gender desks. And the gender desk, you're able to go and they're able to actually deal with cases of this nature, write down your OB, and they're able to follow the judicial process so that there are witnesses, the report was there, it's filed, it was in the OB. So we have many places that are coming up, and now we also do have our hospitals, our public hospitals, where you can also go and access services.
Pointing out on the police and the hospitals, the public hospitals, do you feel as Josephine that the government has done enough to make sure that these cases are prevented?
I would say that the government is doing a lot and they're getting there. We are not where we used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many cases of gender-based violence that used to happen in the past that you never even used to hear about. But nowadays, everyone is talking about FGM, everyone is talking about child marriage. And it's because of the awareness around it, the advocacy, the fact that, the government and the through the judicial systems have been able to, make sure the victims are able to access justice. So the government is not there yet, but we can see the steps they're taking. Like, for example, the way our president has said FGM has to end by 2020, and we have a zero tolerance to GBV by 2030. So you see the steps, and they're working together with development partners and the community members. So I feel like the government is getting there.
Is getting there.
Yes.
I like that. He's getting there. So I have someone who is texting in and saying, I went through rape, FGM, and after that, my husband beats me up. As a person, how am I supposed to heal from all this? Kindly help.
Wow.
This is rape, FGM, and the husband is still exposing her to physical violence. How is she supposed to heal from all this torture and everything that is happening in her life? Because we can clearly tell that she needs help.
That is actually a lot of turmoil for someone to go through, because all of them are different levels and different types of gender-based violence, which just leaves someone so traumatized. But what I would say, the first step to healing is to be able to express yourself. And for us, for the people who she talks to, if she's going to the hospital or she's going to anyone at the family level that she's talking to, as people who are dealing with survivors of gender-based violence, first of all, we need to listen. We need to be able to give them a listening ear. Let them express themselves. Let them speak about what it is they're feeling. No judgment. Don't make assumptions for them. Don't create solutions for them. Don't ask them, now what were you doing there? What were you wearing? Why were you wearing that dress? Don't be quick to judge. Don't say anything. First of all, listen, figure out, and help them just go through whatever that is they're going through. The second thing I would say, which is a priority in healing when it comes to cases of gender-based violence, is separating the victim physically and emotionally, moving them to safety. If someone has been going through, for example, rape or defilement in a family level, and it's probably the close family members that are doing it, separate that person from that place and be able to even link them up with a counselor, counseling psychologist who can be able to have this conversation with them as they're going through the healing process, seeing the doctors and getting through the treatment. They're also able to heal emotionally and psychologically, because this is important. The other thing I talk about is the creation of safe spaces where survivors of gender-based violence can be able to meet with other survivors and to be able to share their stories, for them to be able to have initiatives together, for them to be able to have education and awareness campaigns, to be able to empower other women who are still in those places and they don't know what to do, they don't know where to run, because your story today might be someone else's survival guide.
Wow.
So I would just say that it's something that you should be able, we should be able to listen to them, give them time, let them go through it, and let them speak out and get their own power. Yes.
And what would your advice maybe to a man who's gone through gender-based violence? Of course, the numbers are little, but we have men who've gone through this, and for one reason or another, they're not willing to open up.
Yes.
What would you tell them?
One thing I'd like to speak to the men today, telling them that they're human beings and they also have human rights. Their rights should not be violated. No one should violate your rights just because you have been born in a male-dominated, a patriarchal society, and you've been told that, you're a man, you need to be macho, you need to, you don't cry. I don't want them to take that in. You're a human being. I mean, if men were not supposed to express themselves, then why did God give them tear glands? They would have probably been born without the tear glands. So, I mean, the fact that they're there, I want to tell the men that use your tear glands.
You can cry.
Cry. I mean, cry, talk about it, express yourself, say what you're feeling. There is no stigma in any of that. And I thank God that, therapy has now become a thing. People are able to go for therapy without stigma. There are many counseling psychologists, and if you're not comfortable talking to your family, your wife, your friend, your brother, go and see a counseling psychologist. Go and talk to that neutral person who doesn't know you but will listen to you and will help you come out of that dark place. You shouldn't be in that dark place alone. Speak out.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting because we have safe places for men. There are groups of men who talk about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do have groups of men. I mean, I'm very happy with the 16 Days of Activism campaign that goes on every year that speaks to elimination of violence against women. And I love the fact that we have male champions. Male champions who are speaking out against gender-based violence. I mean, they're at the forefront. They're talking about ending FGM. They're talking about ending child marriages. And they're just like, no, I will not marry a woman who has gone through FGM. And, when the other men in the community see, wow, they're like, okay, John is doing, they're like, Tom is doing this. They're like, okay, I want to be like Tom. I want to, let me join in this campaign. And you see, it has just started building up. And even though you're not physically seeing them, there's a group of them, the keyboard warrior male champions who are able to speak out even on social media and gather other men and be able to speak to them from a man-to-man perspective. So I'm happy that that is a thing actually now, and it is coming up. So we hope that it will continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as an individual, as a society, do we have a role to play in ensuring that gender-based violence is totally phased out in our country?
Yes, because I like the quote for John F. Kennedy, and it was actually just the other day that ask not what can your country do for you, but what can you do for your country? Because ending gender-based violence begins with you and me.
Yeah.
All the toxic norms, all the societal norms that, make me uncomfortable, make you uncomfortable, start with me and you ending them. For example, at the family setting, when you have your children, don't separate the girls and the boys by telling your daughter that, you can't do this. This is the things. The boys are the ones who are messy and, they don't do such things. And girls, you have to do things in this direction, and that is just how girls are supposed to do things. You know, telling girls that you're the one supposed to be in the kitchen cleaning up. I mean, even men get hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, so will you stay hungry because cooking is a
The woman
woman's
is not
thing?
in the house.
Exactly. I mean, so these are basic survival skills that,
Yeah.
you know, we should be able to just teach our children, both boys and girls, grow them up together in a way that they're going to be responsible, not only for themselves, but for the next person. The Bible tells us, love your neighbor
Yep.
as you love yourself. So things that you wouldn't want to be done to you, don't do them to someone else. Because, I mean, you yourself, I mean, just as human beings, we are selfish. You want to be as safe and, you know, sound as possible. So let us, you know, put that out to the next person, because today you're seeing it on the news. It's a girl in Pokot. Tomorrow it might be your daughter, it might be your sister, it might be your wife, it might be your husband.
Yeah.
So let us just take personal responsibility in ending gender-based violence.
Well, there's someone who's sending in a quote. She actually liked your quote and saying, please tell Josephine to emphasize that it depends with the upbringing. As parents, we must focus more on that to make sure that our children grow up to be responsible people.
Absolutely. I totally agree with the comment.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say is in exploring masculinities. You know, right now we have we have mentorship programs, especially for men and boys. And the men, for example, fathers are taking their sons, you know, through mentorship programs that have been organized by, you know, faith-based organizations. Some are just human rights organizations, some are just education-based programs, but, you know, to bring a sense of positive masculinity. Yeah, because right now in the generation that we are in, for us, okay, let me speak about my age group. The people that we are in the same age group and have their children, they've been able to see the effects of gender-based violence. They've probably they've lived through the effects of gender-based violence, and they want to make a difference. I do have one of my friends who has started a group for men. You know, men who just have small babies that have just started, and he was like, you know what, this being a father and being my first child, I think I need support of my fellow men. And he just took the bold step and he started it, and other men have come and they've joined him. You see, so this kind of mentoring that, you know, they're taking that step, and you see, it's something that's going to grow. Just the way we grew into this patriarchy and masculinity, if we start making it positive, then you see, it's going to be a domino effect. It's something that's going to continue happening. So I think that, yeah, we should just be able to put it at that family level, at the school level. Let's talk about it. Let's call things out for what they are.
Wow. As Josephine.
Yes.
Do you think there is hope for our country when it comes to gender-based violence and FGM, all this violence? Do you think there is hope?
There is hope.
Going to be a dream at some point.
There is hope. I mean, there is a lot of hope. I mean, I do believe that every day things are changing. And I can tell you, I have been in this field for, I mean, I think ever since I started doing human rights work when I was 16 years old in my high school.
That's
and, you know,
interesting.
and I can tell you, I mean, to the age that I am now and I am old, like, I have been able to see the change.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it just takes one person to do something else. And I love the awareness campaigns, especially the 16 days of activism. Because you see, like yesterday was the International Day of, it was the World AIDS Day. Tomorrow we're having the International Day for Persons Living with Disability.
Yeah.
So the campaign comes with the 16 days, teaching you different things every day, bringing up survivors, speaking out their stories, telling people, you know, join in the campaign. Don't be afraid to speak out. Mechanisms have been put in place. So I can tell you there is a lot of hope. This will be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
And I am holding hands with the President, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, that 2022, we are going to be talking a different story when it comes to female genital mutilation.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of hope.
There is hope.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have learnt a lot. And please remember, there is hope for the men and women who are facing gender-based violence. Do not be scared to just come out in the open and get help. Thank you so much for tuning in to This Is The Day. My name is Sarah Otieno. Have a lovely evening.